Good morning. My name is Poonam Gulalia on behalf of Mahatma Gandhi National Council of Rural Education. This video is being brought to you. Today's topic is titled Social Action and Related Skills, a topic which many of us feel inclined to discuss. Many of you feel that you have been part of in different ways. Your work experience or your field work experience, your voluntary experience in the field, your lived experiences. It is possible that you have been part of this process in one way or the other. A lot of social action also happens on social media. So we need to understand certain basics of what is being discussed in the video today and how you can relate it to your fieldwork journey, how you can relate it to your classroom learning, and how you can relate it to your own engagement in this space if and when necessary. While discussing this topic, it's also important to understand that there are always fallouts, pro and cons of every activity, action, program. So one needs to be mindful of that process as well when we are discussing this topic today. So beginning with the basic idea, the meaning, the importance, the value of the term social action. As many of you would know, it is one of the methods of social work used in the profession for mobilizing masses, for mobilizing people. The purpose being to bring about structural changes in any social system where required, when required. The other purpose could also be to prevent any adverse changes which may be taking place in a particular social system, in a particular social setting, in a particular context, and a social worker, a professional, an activist, as they are called, might find it necessary as a team to address the issue which is being impacted because of the adverse change that is taking place. So moving on, one can also say that the purpose could be to see it as an organized effort to either change a socio-economic condition or to improve a particular socio-economic condition, depending on the situation. If we elaborate further, one could say that the objectives could be one of many. One, enabling finding solutions to problems at a mass level, at a public level, where public are involved, where social welfare of a larger group of people is involved. It could also be undertaken keeping in mind the need for influencing either institutions, policies or practices in the field. Thirdly, the attempt could be, depending on the context, on the need for redistribution of power, redistribution of resources, redistribution of power and resources in a particular context. And last but not the least, enabling improvement in either health systems, education, or with a welfare motive. Or it could be a combination of enabling improvement in health, education, livelihood needs of people in a particular geographical area. Having laid the basic foundation of why we are discussing social action as an essential topic today in this video, it's also important then to highlight, to bring out or to put forth the indicators of social action. Even though we have dwelt on it in the previous slide, it's essential to elaborate on it a little more so that the context is reinforced, so that the content is reinforced, and so that you can recall it when required, relate to it when you are in the field, and be able to see and perceive it when it's happening in the fieldwork experiences. So it is possible then that when services or benefits to which people are entitled are denied to them, a student social worker, a professional or a social activist, so to say, would find the need to undertake action. And in relation to that, the simple term which has been coined is called social action in a particular context. When discussing this topic, it's also important to understand that what are the skills which you as a social worker are going to utilize, which you are going to learn, which you are going to practice in the field, and which you are going to realize are required in undertaking social action. So, I am repeating that there are pros and cons to undertaking social action, to implementing social action, and to seeing the possible fallouts of undertaking social action in a particular context. And now we are discussing the context, the space, the possibilities where the need for undertaking social action could arise. In that context, I have stated the first as follows, that where the services or the benefits related to either education needs, health needs, livelihood needs, welfare needs, any other aspect of benefits which people are required to be able to avail of, those benefits, those entitlements which are provided by the government or the non-government machinery, by the government departments, or by the fact that they are located in a particular place, if any of those services are denied to them, then that becomes a space where social action can be undertaken. The other important space which become important indicators of social action include situations which could be dehumanizing or confrontational or coercing. What does that mean? It means that if I belong to a particular caste or a class or a gender or an ethnic group or a race, and by virtue of belonging to a particular community or a class group or a caste group or a sexual orientation group, certain practices are undertaken by other people which could impact my lifestyle, my living, my being, and it could be dehumanizing for me as a group, or it could be creating confrontational spaces for me. People might be confronting me because of my particular belongingness to a caste group, or I could be coerced into acting on behalf of, say, a peripheral group, or I might be isolated, that is part of being dehumanized, or I could be excluded because of belonging to a particular class group. All these become spaces wherein social action could be undertaken and the need for social action could arise. This also relates to the fact that discrimination is occurring. So, when discriminatory practices or policies occur, when discrimination occurs, when exclusion occurs, when othering occurs, and when situations arise where inclusion is not practiced as the norm, again it becomes a space where social activists would come in. Another important aspect which needs to be brought in mind when discussing social action is that there could be spaces where people lack representation or participation in decision making. So, we might say that meetings have been held in a particular community center, in a Chaupal Ghar, in a Panchayat Ghar, in an Anganwadi center. But how are these meetings conducted? How democratic are the procedures adopted? Is representation in actuality being practiced? Is it passive representation? Is it active representation? Is it proxy representation? All these become spaces for learning for the student social worker, for enabling them to learn skills in working with people, but also spaces to be able to perceive that do these people require representation for social action in due course of time. So, one cannot say that one-off incident has occurred. One such incident occurred means I must get going and start mobilizing the people and get them activated. Is it a series of events? Is it occurring as a series of events or recurrently occurring or constantly occurring, that has to be also determined by the student social worker and the social activist. So those parameters one needs to work around later on, but at the moment we are just flagging the indicators, the spaces, the need for social action as an integral element for fieldwork learning and for skill building. So having discussed with you spaces where people may be entitled, may not get the services which are supposed to be provided to them, welfare services are being denied to them, or they have not been represented adequately, or not so humanitarian approach has been undertaken and they are treated in a dehumanizing or in a coercive way, spaces where discrimination may occur, all these become reasons and spaces for undertaking social action. The last two aspects in this sector which discusses the need and the space includes possibility where a significant group of people have common needs for which resources are not available. One is they are not provided, one is they are not available, one is that the need is not recognized in itself. कि इन लोगों को जरूरत ही नहीं है, इनके बारे में सोचने की आवश्यकता ही नहीं है. So there are many nuances in understanding these spaces. And last but not the least, it's possible that certain target groups, certain beneficiaries, certain clients or certain client groups, they are denied either civil rights or legal rights. And in that context too, it becomes necessary that they may approach a social activist, they may approach a social worker who will also engage for social action. So one, I hope that all of you are beginning to understand the topic for which this video has been designed and which is being discussed, that is social action and related skills. Just repeating some of the basics which we have already been through. Social action is one of the methods of social work used for mobilizing masses depending on the need and depending on an organized effort for the need to either improve or change the socio-economic conditions of people, or to initiate structural changes in a system, or to prevent any abuse or any adverse changes which may be taking place in the field. One of the methods then which we will now be discussing, which is a very common practice and which some of you may already be engaged with in some form or the other and would definitely have heard of, is called the Right to Information Act. So the RTI in short, or the Right to Information Act, is one example which we are taking, which social workers engage with, indulge in, and it is used for social action. Why does this need arise, and what example can we use to explain Right to Information Act? You would have read about it in the theory class, so we will not go into the theoretical aspect of it, but we will take a small example to explain, and maybe, as I said, some of you have already been exposed to or have used the Right to Information Act in your fieldwork journey or in your lived experiences, or have known of people who have used this to avail of information and to get into a space called social action. So if we take an example of, say, National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. So the question which could be framed using the Right to Information Act, wherein a format is available which you can also look at on the website, you can also study it along with this video, so that you are using supplementary information, classroom information, and also using your own skills to practice, that if you need to apply on behalf of a group of people, on behalf of a certain section of society whom you are working with in the field, then you can use this example and understand how to go about it. So it will also help you to build confidence in you as a student social worker, as a trainee social worker, to engage in this process. So coming back to this example of National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, one of the students framed the following four questions which I am reading out to you, and you can think about it. Later on you can use the time to discuss it with your co-workers and your supervisors, and you can also reflect on whether it is appropriate, applicable, and what could be the other additional questions required to be answered in case you get an incomplete revert or an incomplete answer to these questions. So reading from what were the questions framed: 1. How many persons were employed under the scheme in a given district in Chhattisgarh? 2. What is the daily wage being paid to those who were employed in this district? 3. How many projects with how many mandates have been allotted to the respective panchayat? 4. How much budget has been utilized? So these four questions were framed by the student because he wanted to understand, while working in the field, that some people in his district were engaged with the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, but he did not have adequate information and nobody was able to help him, so he filed a right to information under the RTI Act. Having filed this information, having filed this plea, being a social activist, using social action as an important medium of communication, using it as a mode which he learnt and is learning in social work profession, the possible reply that he could have got: 1. He was provided with the list of beneficiaries under the scheme. 2. That would enable him to cross-check in the field whether those individuals were there, available, had undertaken this project, had undertaken mandates of work under the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, whether they received payment for the same, and how much payment did they receive for the number of days as per the government records, which means that the government records he or she should have had access to, the government records should have been made available to him, and it should tally with the real time names of the people who were employed under this scheme and who worked under this scheme. Now, explaining this small example to you, you will appreciate that if there is a mismatch of names, mismatch of days, mismatch of working days, mismatch of payments, any discrepancy in the records with what is available under the reply he got, he can cross question, he can highlight, he can use that data to identify any corrupt practices which might have taken place. He can enable the beneficiaries to get access to justice. He can enable the beneficiaries to list down their concerns. He can enable them to file a complaint. He can enable himself as a social activist or in collaboration with a social activist to approach the contractor. But it also means that in this ideal situation, there could be spaces where people may questioning you for challenging their authority. So one needs to understand this aspect, that when we raise such concerns of equality, of democracy, of equity, there could be fallout in terms of ruffling some feathers. Some people in positions of authority and power may not like the fact. So we need to be mindful of this as well when we undertake social action. That's why in the beginning itself of the video, my attempt was to say that there are always pro and cons to discussing this aspect, to implementing social action, and to understand the limitations as a student social worker which we might face in even using a simple medium like Right to Information Act. Having said this, I will also give one more example and then conclude this video. The example, another example where social action is undertaken is where people file what is called a public interest litigation. So the short form of it is PIL, public interest litigation. It is filed largely where human rights have been violated or specific problems have arisen because of some serious violation of human rights of a certain section of people. So a PIL or a public interest litigation can be filed in either a High Court or a Supreme Court. We require a lawyer who is socially and legally competent to draft a petition. So the legal skills, the legal competency of a lawyer, his or her experience of drafting petitions related to public interest litigation are required, so that we are not wasting time, energy and resources. We must also realize that many a time lawyers have to be paid. All are not available as unpaid free lawyer services. So we have to see the paying capacity either of the organization or the people on behalf of whom we are filing this public interest litigation through the lawyer. So the lawyer will rely on a lot of facts and figures which you as a student social worker or as a professional would be required to collaborate, undertake, collate. So you need to study the problem thoroughly. It can't be that we superficially study an issue, think that we want to become a social activist, so we should quickly file a public interest litigation and give a half-baked or an incomplete situation to a lawyer. We need to be thorough in the collection of facts and figures. We need to cross-check our data. We need to be mindful of the time that we are using, of the people for whom we are filing this, and be sure of from whom we are collecting the data. Are they the competent authority on this matter, or are they being emotional about the issue? Do we need to cross-check it with any other people in the community, like community leaders or the key informants or the local authorities or the local panchayat? There are many ways which we can cross-check the data, which we will provide to the lawyer. We also need to understand through the lawyer's services that which commissions are empowered under the government machinery to register and investigate these complaints. So I am naming 3 commissions which I will request you to read up on a little more, and their operationalization can be discussed in another video. For now, please note down the names of these commissions. One is the National Women's Commission related to rights and women's issues. Second is the National Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Commission related to the rights and needs of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes populations. And the third is the National Human Rights Commission. So my request to you as I conclude this video is to go back and read up so that you feel involved in this process and don't just take a back seat in assuming that all the data will be provided to you in the video. You need to supplement it with your own self-study. You are all adult learners. Supplement it with your classroom teaching. Cross-check it with your supervisors. Discuss it in the field with the organizations where you are working. That do these organizations work with social activist groups? Do your co-workers work with any advocacy groups in their fieldwork journey? Do any of your seniors or your peers or other professors or teachers or lecturers in your college, are they involved in any advocacy groups? So there are many stakeholders in the system, and our request to you through this video is to use other resources to enhance your understanding, to complement your understanding, to supplement your understanding with this video. We also would like to conclude by saying that the success of social action always depends on people's participation. Many a time they look for press coverage, for social media coverage, and it has to be done very discreetly and very carefully so that the rights and of human rights of people are protected, the confidentiality is not tampered with, and we do justice to the task which we are undertaking. With this video and this conclusion, I would like to close this video. We wish you all the best in understanding and operationalizing what you are understanding through these videos, and we hope that you will use it fruitfully for your own professional growth and become a practicing professional whom everyone is proud of. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and all the best to each one of you. Thank you.